betrayal doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it's as quiet as a whisper at a dinner table or as sudden as a hand striking your face in front of everyone you love. I never thought my own son would be capable of such cruelty, but when you've spent 58 years on this earth like I have, you learn that people, even your own flesh and blood, can surprise you in the worst ways. I gave him every chance to do the right thing, but in the end he saw me as nothing more than a convenience, an ATM, a punching bag for his frustration. And when I finally stood up for myself, well, that's when I learned what he was truly capable of. I've lived in Millbrook, Connecticut for over 30 years. It's a pretty little town in the northern part of the state, the kind of place where people know your business before you do. I moved here with William when we were newlyweds, back when his financial consulting career was just taking off and I still believed in forever. Our colonial revival house sits on Oak Street with its wraparound porch and white columns that always reminded me of a southern mansion dropped into New England by mistake. The neighbors used to call it the Richardson Castle. Now they just whisper when I walk by. That Thursday morning before Thanksgiving, I was polishing the silver serving dishes my grandmother had left me, the ones with the delicate rose patterns that take forever to clean but look stunning on a holiday table. My arthritic fingers protested, but I kept at it. I'd been hosting Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years, and despite everything that had happened, this year wouldn't be any different. My phone buzzed on the counter. Jacob's name flashed on the screen, my son, 40 years old now, with my late father's strong jawline and his father's calculating eyes. "Mom," he said when I picked up, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness he'd perfected over the years. "Just wanted to confirm we're still on for tomorrow. Isabella's bringing her famous stuffing." "Everything's ready," I said, running my thumb over a water spot on the silver. "Dinner at 4, same as always." "Great. Also, Dad wanted me to ask if it's okay if he comes a bit early. Says he has some documents he needs you to review." The serving spoon in my hand stilled. William and I had been divorced for 8 years, the kind of divorce where 40 years of marriage ends with a text message and an empty closet. The kind where your husband leaves you for his 28-year-old marketing coordinator and tries to hide half the assets you built together. "What documents?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Something about the old mountain cabin property," he said. "It's just a formality. The buyers need both signatures since you guys purchased it together." The mountain cabin, our summer retreat in the Adirondacks that William had insisted we keep in both our names after the divorce for tax purposes, he'd claimed. The one asset the divorce lawyers hadn't fought over. "Fine," I said after a moment. "Tell him 3 o'clock. "Thanks, Mom. And one more thing, Ethan might be bringing someone." Ethan, my grandson, 19 and already carrying himself with the same entitlement his father had perfected. "That's fine. There's plenty of food." "Great. See you tomorrow." After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the polished silver. The face looking back at me had changed so much over the decades, soft creases around the eyes, silver strands woven through once auburn hair, a certain hardness around the mouth that hadn't been there in my wedding photos. I'd given William 3 children, Jacob, Olivia, and Samuel. Only Jacob still lived nearby. Olivia had moved to Portland years ago, calling only on birthdays and Christmas. Samuel had died in a motorcycle accident 10 years earlier, leaving behind a void that nothing could fill. William hadn't cried at the funeral. I'd never forgiven him for that. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the mountain cabin, the one place that had remained untouched by the bitterness of our divorce. The place where I'd taught the children to swim in the lake, where we'd roasted marshmallows under summer stars, where Samuel had announced his engagement. The one piece of our history that William hadn't tainted. The next day, the doorbell rang at exactly 2:45. William stood on my porch, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing one of those cashmere sweaters that his new wife Charlotte picked out for him. At 66, he still maintained the fit physique of a man a decade younger, money and vanity were powerful motivators. "Margaret," he said with that practiced smile, "you look well." "Come in, William," I replied, stepping aside. His cologne, different from what he'd worn during our marriage, filled the entryway as he followed me to the living room. I wondered if Charlotte had chosen that too. "Jacob mentioned documents," I said. "Yes, just a formality really." He pulled an envelope from his leather briefcase. "The development company needs both our signatures since we're still co-owners." "Development company?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Jacob didn't tell you. We're selling the mountain property. They're building a luxury resort complex, condos, a spa, the works. The offer is substantial." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You're selling our mountain cabin without discussing it with me first." William had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. "I thought Jacob would have mentioned it. We've been discussing it for months." Months. My son and ex-husband had been planning this for months, and neither had bothered to tell me. "The property has been sitting unused," William continued, his tone shifting to the one he used when explaining complicated matters to me. "It makes financial sense, Margaret. The return on investment is—" "Stop," I held up my hand. "Just stop talking to me like I'm a child, William." He sighed, that familiar exasperated sound that always made me feel small. "The papers are here. The sale is going through whether you sign today or next week. I just thought it would be easier to handle it before everyone arrives." Easier for him, of course. Always for him. "How much?" I asked. "What? How much are they paying for the property?" He named a figure that made my eyebrows rise. It was considerably more than I'd expected, enough to set me up comfortably for the rest of my life, even split in half. "And when were you planning to tell me about my share?" I asked. William shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that's the thing. The investment was technically made from my premarital assets. My lawyer has the documentation." "Your premarital assets?" I laughed, a sharp sound that seemed to surprise both of us. "William, we bought that property 15 years into our marriage with money we saved together. Technically, the initial down payment came from my trust fund. And every payment after that came from our joint account. The account I contributed to by running your household, raising your children, and working part-time while you built your career." His jaw tightened. "Margaret, don't make this difficult. The paperwork is straightforward. You sign, I sign, and this ends cleanly. Like our marriage ended cleanly." The words escaped before I could stop them. The doorbell rang again. I glanced at my watch, 3:30. Jacob was early. "We'll discuss this later," William said, tucking the papers back into his briefcase. I opened the front door to find Jacob and his wife Isabella, their son Ethan, and a young woman I didn't recognize. Behind them stood my daughter Olivia, whose presence surprised me. She hadn't mentioned flying in from Portland. "Mom." Jacob embraced me stiffly. "Look who made it. Olivia surprised us at the airport last night." Olivia stepped forward, her expression guarded. "Hi, Mom. Hope it's okay I crashed Thanksgiving." "Of course it is," I said, hugging her. She felt thin in my arms. "It's been too long." As everyone moved into the living room, I noticed the glances exchanged between William and Jacob. Something unspoken passed between them, something that made my skin prickle with unease. I retreated to the kitchen to check on the turkey, my mind swimming with questions. Why was Olivia really here? Why was William trying to cheat me out of the cabin proceeds? And why did I feel like I was walking into an ambush in my own home? "Need any help, Mom?" Jacob appeared in the doorway, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "No, everything's under control," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. Though you could have warned me about the mountain cabin. His expression shifted, too quickly to hide his guilt. Dad asked me not to say anything until the deal was closer to final. He didn't want to upset you unnecessarily. Upset me? It's my property too, Jacob. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Mom, Dad's just trying to make things simple. The money could help everyone. Ethan's college tuition is killing us, and Olivia's art gallery needs investors. So that was it. They'd already decided how to spend my share of the money. And what about what I need? I asked quietly. He looked genuinely confused. You have this house, your pension. What else do you need at your age? At my age. As if being 58 meant I should quietly accept whatever scraps they decided to throw my way. The turkey should be ready in 30 minutes, I said instead of answering. Tell everyone to get settled at the table. As Jacob left, I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the feast I'd spent days preparing. In that moment, I felt a coldness settle over me, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. They thought I would roll over, sign away my rights, be the accommodating mother and ex-wife I'd always been. They were wrong. I carried the turkey to the dining room with practiced ease, despite its weight. The table was a picture of holiday perfection, crystal glasses catching the light from my grandmother's candelabra, autumn-colored napkins folded just so, name cards written in my best calligraphy. Old habits die hard. It looks beautiful, Mom, Olivia said, but her eyes were on her phone. Everyone took their seats, William at the opposite end of the table from me, a position he'd claimed decades ago. Jacob and Isabella to his right, Olivia to his left. Ethan and his girlfriend Charlotte, she'd introduced herself, sat beside me. The empty chair where Samuel would have sat remained, as always. Before we eat, William announced, raising his wine glass, I'd like to propose a toast. To family, to new beginnings. His eyes met mine across the table, challenging. To family, they echoed, glasses clinking. I smiled thinly and began carving the turkey. Actually, Jacob said as I served, we have some news to share. Isabella reached for his hand, beaming. We're moving. Jacob's been offered a position at William's new investment firm, she continued. Congratulations, I said, passing plates around. Where will you be moving to? Switzerland, Jacob replied. Geneva, specifically. The European headquarters are there. I set down the carving knife. Switzerland. That's quite far. It's an incredible opportunity, William interjected. I've been grooming Jacob for this position for months. The compensation package is extraordinary. What about Ethan's college? I asked, looking at my grandson. Gap year, Ethan replied with a shrug. Dad's hooking me up with an internship over there. William was beaming like a proud patriarch. The position comes with a substantial signing bonus. Enough to cover the mountain cabin renovations Jacob's been wanting to do. My head snapped up. Mountain cabin renovations. A moment of awkward silence descended. Jacob cleared his throat. Actually, Mom, that's something we wanted to discuss. Dad's offering me his half of the proceeds from the cabin sale. The room felt suddenly airless. His half. I repeated slowly. Well, yes, William said smoothly. Once you sign the papers, of course. The developers are eager to close before year-end. I placed my napkin beside my plate and folded my hands. And what exactly do you think my half should be used for, William? He exchanged glances with Jacob, the kind of look that had always excluded me. We thought a portion could help Olivia with her gallery expansion, and perhaps a trust for Ethan's education when he decides to return to school. My daughter straightened in her chair. Mom, it's a contemporary art space with enormous potential. I've been trying to secure funding for months. I see, I took a sip of water. So you've all decided how to spend my money already. It's not like that, Jacob said quickly. We just thought that I wouldn't need it, I finished for him. That at my age, as you put it earlier, I should be content to hand over my assets to my children. Mom, please, Olivia sighed. It's Thanksgiving. Can we not do this now? When would be a better time, Olivia? When the papers are signed. When the money's gone. When you're all living your improved lives funded by the retirement I worked 40 years for. William's jaw tightened. Margaret, you're being dramatic. Nobody is taking anything from you. This is about family planning, asset management. No, William. This is about control. The same control you've exerted since the day we married. A tense silence fell over the table. Ethan's girlfriend shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mom, Jacob said in the placating tone he'd inherited from his father, no one's trying to control you. We're trying to help you make the smart financial decision. The smart financial decision, I repeated. And that would be signing away my rightful half of the cabin proceeds so you can renovate a property I co-own but apparently won't have access to. You'd always be welcome to visit, Isabella offered weakly. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. How generous. William leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone I knew too well. Margaret, I strongly suggest you consider the bigger picture here. Jacob's opportunity in Switzerland is partly contingent on certain financial arrangements being in place. Are you threatening me, William? I'm explaining reality. My company is making this investment in Jacob's future. The cabin funds would ensure a smooth transition for the entire family. I looked at my son, the boy I'd nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike, helped with science projects late into the night. And you're okay with this? With your father using your career as leverage to coerce me? Jacob had the decency to look uncomfortable. It's not coercion, Mom. It's practical. The money would benefit everyone. Everyone except me. Jesus, Mom, Olivia interjected. It's not always about you. Jacob has a family to think about. I'm trying to build something meaningful. Why can't you support us for once? For once. I set down my fork with deliberate care. I have supported you your entire lives. I put my career on hold. I ran this household. I was there for every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference while your father built his empire. And you've been well provided for, William cut in. Have I? I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. You fought me on every penny of alimony. You contested the division of assets we built together. You left me with a house I can barely afford to maintain and a pension that doesn't cover rising property taxes. That's not fair, Jacob protested. Dad was generous in the settlement. Is that what he told you? I looked at my son. Did he also tell you that he hid assets? That he moved money offshore before filing? That his lawyer threatened to drag out proceedings until I couldn't afford to fight anymore? William's face flushed with anger. That's enough, Margaret. No, I don't think it is. I moved to the antique secretary desk in the corner of the dining room and retrieved a leather portfolio I'd placed there earlier that morning, a precaution born from decades of marriage to a man who always had a hidden agenda. What is that? William demanded. Insurance, I replied, returning to my place at the table. I opened the portfolio and removed a stack of documents. William, do you remember Samuel's funeral? The non sequitur seemed to throw him. What? What does that have to do with anything? You didn't cry, I said simply. Our son was lowered into the ground, and you checked your watch 3 times during the service. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. After the reception, I found you in your study on a conference call. You told me, life goes on, Margaret. The markets don't stop for grief. I slid the top document across the table. It was a deed, the deed to the mountain cabin, dated 3 years ago, with only my name on it. William snatched it up, his face darkening as he read. This is a forgery, he sputtered. The cabin is in both our names. It was, I agreed. Until 3 years ago, when I had it transferred solely to me. You signed the paperwork yourself. I never signed this. You did. Along with dozens of other documents that crossed your desk that week. Your executive assistant at the time, Marcus, I believe, was quite helpful. William's face contorted with rage. That's illegal. That's fraud. Actually, it's not. Marcus presented the document, you signed it. There were witnesses. It's all quite legitimate. You tricked me. I learned from the best, I replied coldly. The same way you tried to trick me out of my share of the retirement accounts. The same way you hid money in offshore accounts before filing for divorce. The difference is, I have proof of what you did. I withdrew another document, a thick report, and placed it beside my plate. The forensic accountant was very thorough. What proof? William demanded. Bank transfers, shell companies, the works. I took a sip of water, wincing as it touched my split lip. I've had this for years. I never used it because I wanted peace. I wanted our children to respect their father. I looked at Jacob, who had sunk back into his chair, his face in his hands. But today I see that my silence has cost me that respect instead. This is blackmail, William hissed. This is consequence, I corrected. Something you've managed to avoid your entire life. I turned to Olivia. Did you know your father has been manipulating stock prices in his own company? Selling shares through offshore accounts while publicly promoting the company's bright future. The Securities Commission might find that interesting. Her eyes widened. Dad, is that true? William's face had gone gray. Margaret, you have no idea what you're talking about. Those transactions were perfectly legal. Were they? Then you won't mind if I send this file to the regulatory board. Or perhaps to the business press. I raised an eyebrow. I'm sure your shareholders would be fascinated. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. What do you want? William finally asked, his voice barely audible. First, I want the true value of the cabin property. Not half, all of it. Since I am, as you now know, the sole owner. William's jaw worked silently. Second, I want the money you kept from me during the divorce. With interest. That's ridiculous. Third, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, I want a public apology. For all of it. The affairs, the lies, the financial manipulation. You're insane, he breathed. No, William. For the first time in decades, I'm perfectly lucid. I stood and walked to the china cabinet, retrieving an old photograph in a silver frame. I placed it in front of Jacob. Do you remember this day? He looked down at the image, himself at 10 years old, proudly holding up a base nearly as big as he was, standing on the dock at the mountain cabin. You caught your first fish, I said softly. Your father was in Chicago closing a deal. I was the one who taught you to bait the hook, to wait patiently, to know when to reel in. Jacob's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. What did your father say to you, Jacob? What words could possibly justify conspiring against your mother? My son looked at William, then back at me, shame written across his face. He said you were trying to ruin everything. That you'd always been jealous of my relationship with him. That you were. He swallowed hard. Mentally unstable. That sometimes the only way to deal with hysterical women is to shock them back to reality. A cold silence fell over the room. Even William seemed to shrink under the weight of his words being spoken aloud. And then Jacob moved. His face twisted with rage, not at his father, but at me. His hand came up fast and vicious. The crack of palm against cheek echoed in the suddenly silent room. The force knocked me sideways. I stumbled, colliding with the serving cart. China crashed to the floor as I caught myself against the wall, my cheek burning with the imprint of my son's hand. For one frozen moment, no one moved. No one spoke. I tasted blood, metallic and warm. My ear rang. The room seemed to tilt and sway. Isabella gasped. Olivia's hands flew to her mouth. Ethan stood halfway from his chair, shock freezing him mid-motion. But instead of crying, instead of collapsing, instead of begging, all reactions they might have expected from the woman they thought me to be, I smiled. The smile felt strange on my stinging face, but I held it as I straightened my spine and met my son's eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. Jacob blinked, confusion replacing rage. His hand hovered in the air between us as if he couldn't quite believe what he had done. "You just lost the one thing your father always wanted," I continued, my voice steady despite the burning in my cheek. "Mom," Jacob stammered, suddenly looking like a little boy again, horrified by his own actions. William stepped forward, his face hard. "Jacob was right to put you in your place. Your behavior is unacceptable." I laughed then, a genuine laugh that seemed to unnerve them all more than any scream could have. "My place." I touched my cheek gently. "Is this where you think my place is, William? On the floor with the broken china? Is that what you taught our son?" "Stop being so dramatic," William snapped, but there was something new in his expression now, weariness. "Jacob, apologize," he continued. "You lost your temper." Our son stood frozen, his face ashen. "Mom, I didn't mean to. God, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," I said, straightening the tablecloth with trembling hands. "Not yet. First, I want you all to hear something." I had prepared for this moment, the moment when their true nature would be revealed. In my purse, I had evidence they never knew existed. Bank statements, recorded conversations, financial documents that would destroy them all if made public. But looking at my son's horrified face, at the realization dawning in his eyes of what he had become, I made a different choice. "I want you all to leave," I said simply. "Now." "Mom," Jacob started. "Now," I repeated, more firmly. As they filed out, William's face a mask of fury, Jacob's crumpled with shame, Olivia's confused and angry, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Freedom. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. I walked to the window and watched their cars disappear down Oak Street. Then I went upstairs, packed a single suitcase, and drove to the mountain cabin. 6 months later, I sit on the deck watching morning light dance across the lake. I sold the house in Millbrook, donated most of its contents to charity, and made the cabin my permanent residence. William's legal challenges failed. His business collapsed under regulatory scrutiny. Jacob lost his position in Switzerland and works now at a small firm in Albany, our relationship severed as cleanly as I had severed ties to his father. Olivia sends letters sometimes, angry at first, then pleading, then simply sad. I read them but don't respond. Only Ethan visits occasionally, careful to respect my boundaries. He broke with his father after that Thanksgiving, appalled by what he had witnessed. "Don't you ever miss them?" he asked during his last visit. "Don't you ever think about forgiving them?" I looked out at the lake where I'd once taught his father to swim, where I'd watched my children grow, where I'd finally found my own strength. "No," I said simply. "Some things can't be forgiven." And in that moment, watching the sun set over water that now belonged solely to me, I felt neither regret nor sorrow, only the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served, and an inheritance of strength I'd claimed for myself.